one of the most disturbing and bizarre cases unfolding as we speak. That all started when two kids went missing, 7-year-old JJ and his 17-year-old sister Tylee, their mother, Lori Vallow, refusing to cooperate with police.
And I feel like Lori was convinced those kids had turned into zombies. And so the whole thing is like, how can you can't make, if this was a movie script, nobody would believe it. They wouldn't even go to the movie because it's so ridiculous. But it's real life.
Lori became obsessed with the end of the world and books written by Chad Daybell, who she would eventually marry and dive deep into his strange beliefs.
And the belief system is, according to Chad Daybell, they are being called to gather 144,000 people to help with the second coming. Now, what does help mean? I don't know, because people are dying around them.
Including Lori's children, her brother, her sister, her third husband, fourth husband, and current husband's late wife. You can see this is as complex as it gets. Now, before we dive into the case, I want to remind you that this is for mature audiences and might not be for everyone. This case is also still being litigated in the court of law. Lori and Chad have not been convicted of any crimes. Their preliminary hearings are this month, so we should learn more about the evidence against them. Also, stay tuned after the episode. I want to share with you some podcasts that I'm listening to, Crime Lines and Bloody Murder. I also have a shout out for investigators who wrote reviews on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. It really is a great way to be part of the podcast, and reviews help independent podcasts like this one get noticed. More on that after the case. Doomsday Cult Mom, Lori Vallow. Investigators, you're on deadline.
From the social distancing studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, to your ear holes, this is True Crime Deadline, a podcast discussing cold cases, murder, mysteries, and completely random thoughts. Now your host, a man who sings happy birthday twice when washing his hands, Mr. Mystery himself, Matt Johnson.
Investigators, thank you for joining me for episode 26, Cult Mom Lori Vallow and her doomsday author of a husband, Chad Daybell. This is a disturbing and complex story, can't say it enough, with lots of twists and turns that started making headlines in September of last year, 2019, when Lori's two kids, 7-year-old JJ and 17-year-old Tylee, vanished. Family and friends spent months pleading to Lori to tell everyone where the kids were. There were vigils, there were searches, and then in June of this year, the outcome everyone was dreading. The kids' remains were found in a field near Chad Daybell's property in rural Idaho.
During the investigation, the investigators and detectives have recovered what's believed to be human remains.
No one's been charged in their deaths yet, so no one has been charged with murder.
That's Kim Powell, reporter for AZ Family in Arizona. She has been boots-on-the-ground reporter chasing Lori and Chad all over the country, just trying to get answers. This is part of her reporting on the case in Hawaii.
Family tells us Kauai is Lori Vallow's favorite place. So it's no surprise she ended up on the island with her new husband, Chad Daybell, avoiding police confrontation as they desperately search for her missing kids, 7-year-old JJ and 17-year-old Tylee.
Thank you for taking a few minutes to be part of the podcast and answer some questions for me and make sense of this whole web of whatever we're dealing with this couple.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to help. It's a complex story, so bear with me.
How would you first off describe the story in a nutshell?
A twist and turn web of death. That's honestly the easiest way to describe it. I mean, to put it in a nutshell is really hard.
Yeah, because we still don't even know what the end is going to be. How were you assigned the story initially? And what did we think it was at that point?
So I remember hearing about it vaguely in December, because that's when the Rexburg Police Department started sending out, hey, there's these two missing kids in Idaho. And so then we do some digging. We find out they're originally from Arizona. So it's kind of something that we're covering. We're updating it periodically. And then we start digging more and more into it. And we're like, wait, there's a dead husband. There's a dead wife. There's a dead brother.
There are 3 deaths surrounding this couple that are all under investigation, including Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, her brother, Alex Cox, who shot him, and Chad Daybell's previous wife, Tammy. Court paperwork shows that Charles became worried about JJ's safety because Lori became obsessed with believing she was a god and needed to prepare people for the end of the world. Chad is an author of several Doomsday books.
And how did she get this nickname, Doomsday Cult Mom?
So Chad Daybell has been writing Doomsday books for the last 2 decades, and he has been known as a prepper. And he's been writing these books saying that he has had visions about the afterlife, and he has been sent, as well as Lori, to gather the 144,000. So I think it's around 2018, maybe even 2017, Lori attended one of his seminars that was in Arizona, and that's how she got to know him. And then she appeared on one of his podcasts, and they started connecting. So while she was married to Charles Vallow, she's now connecting with Chad Daybell. In what capacity, I'm not really sure, but they start connecting, and she learns from him that she is Mary French, and he is James the Just. They used to be married in a previous life, and it gets kind of hard to believe. And then you'll hear in some of Charles Vallow's body camera footage before his death, like he called police on her saying, "Hey, my wife is losing her mind. My wife is not acting mentally sane. I need her to be taken to a mental institution for an evaluation." And it's bizarre watching the officers interact with him because it seemed like they didn't really believe him.
So what makes her a danger to herself and to others?
Threatened me, murder me, kill me.
She threatened to murder you?
Yes.
You don't know if she posed a threat to your children.
I don't know what she's going to do with them. I don't know if she's going to flee with them. She's going to hurt them.
Charles died less than 6 months later, shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who also died in December.
I think one of the more interesting parts of the probable cause for Chad and Lori on these newer charges was that they connected Alex Cox to JJ and Tylee's death. And Alex, as you know, has died, but his death was ruled natural. So that, and weirdly enough, that death was ruled natural, but it is still an open case in Gilbert, Arizona. So that to me tells me there's still something that they're looking into.
It's just so bizarre how many deaths are connected to this one woman.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go on, there's so many forums about this story online of people that are just obsessed with it, that people bring up deaths from her sister growing up. I think her name was Stacy, and she passed away several years ago. Now people are asking, well, how did she die? And weirdly enough, she died, and Alex took her credit card afterwards.
Really?
Yeah. So there are so many things. And there's also the previous husband, Joe Ryan, who died in 2018. And that I know for a fact that the FBI reached out to Phoenix police and said, "Hey, we might need your notes on that investigation. Could you give that to us?" They didn't ask them to reopen his death investigation, but they said, "We need all of your information from Joe Ryan's death," which is kind of telling in itself.
Hi friends, we are Carl
and Joanne,
and our podcast is Goldilocks and the Silver Fox.
In our lighthearted podcasts, we share our unique ability to find humor in our marriage, adventures, and everyday life. Everything from crashing cars,
practical jokes,
unique blend of sarcasm,
Joanne's ADHD,
Carl's ability to be annoyed and entertained at the same time.
If you need a little laughter and want to have some fun,
find us on Apple,
Spotify, and anywhere else you upload your podcasts.
We are also on YouTube. Just search Goldilocks and the Silver Fox.
Goldilocks and the Silver Fox. Goldilocks and the Silver Fox.
Yeah, that there is so many open investigations now into these other deaths that now need to be revisited. Very bizarre. Have you had interaction with the grandparents or any family members?
I grew very close with the grandparents throughout since January, really, throughout this whole thing. And we would even have pizza with them in the hotel room in Idaho. And since they found the remains, we've kind of backed off, given them their space to grieve and stuff as they asked. But I think about them every day. I mean, Larry is the most wholesome man I've ever met. And whenever he saw me in Idaho, he would give me a big hug, say, "Hey, darling." And then you have Kay, and Kay is tough as nails. And she has been the face of this, just kind of getting the word out. And I've seen her break down maybe once or twice. And so to know, or to only imagine what they were going through on June 9th, I believe it was, but it's hard.
I know that you're a reporter, and you do a good job of that, but you're also a person too. Has it been tough to cover?
Again, when you get to know Kay and Larry, and then you find out what happens to JJ and Tylee, it's hard to swallow. Because of course we all held out hope for Kay and Larry and the other family members.
How were the children described?
Oh gosh. JJ, as you might know, he was autistic. He had a service dog here in Arizona before they moved to Idaho, but it sounds like he was just a ball of energy, always running around. A typical 7-year-old. And Kay always told me that he loved suitcases. Like, don't know why, but suitcases. He liked to collect them. And she thinks it's because his dad, Charles, always traveled. So he associated suitcases with his dad. But I thought that was just a quirky little 7-year-old thing. Like, some obsessed with the garbage man, And for JJ, it was suitcases. So I thought that was sweet. And he also loved M&Ms. And then Tylee, 17-year-old girl, she grew up here in Arizona. I've talked to her best friend before, who's just besides herself. But Tylee, she's 17. She's loving life. I've seen her photos on Facebook where she's having fun at the beach in Hawaii because it's her second home, basically. And I think that was the hard part, reading some of those documents, was that Lori was calling Tylee a zombie. And Tylee said, "No, not me." So Tylee kind of knew what was coming, I think. And I looking at that, and you think about it more and more, and it's hard.
Yeah, mom must have been like feeding them information that as she's learning or thinks that she's discovering when she's becoming more and more disturbed. And then the daughter is recognizing and pushing back, "No, it's not us. It's not me."
Yeah, exactly. Because Lori was saying that she was put on this earth to get rid of the zombies. And as bizarre as that sounds, and then Tylee hears, "Oh, wait, you called my dad a zombie too, and now he's dead. And now you're calling me a zombie." I can only imagine that's what's going through her mind, but that is in the court paperwork that Tylee said, "No, not me." And not too long after that, she was dead.
And I feel like Lori was convinced those kids had turned into zombies.
Kathy Russin is executive trial producer with Law and Crime Network. She studies murder cases for a living. And since this case hasn't played out in court yet, I wanted to get her take on what to watch for. What fascinates you about this case?
What fascinates me about the case is the relationship Lori and Chad have with their faith and with the seemingly crazy part of their beliefs. I grew up in Utah. I am a member of the LDS Church, so I'm very fascinated because they're so far off into left field, and it's like, how did they get there? Because Chad, by all accounts, was never like that. Chad grew up as a member of the church and went on a mission and married his wife, and they had 5 kids, and they're all active in the church, and everybody loved him in that area, and they still talk about that now up there. Like he was the part of their community. He was this great speaker and this charming person, and knew the scriptures inside and out. Now, what happened? How did he go so far? And that is, for me, the fascinating part, and the part that people believe, and this could be true. People believe that that Lori's just an evil mom and didn't want to be burdened with her kids anymore, and had them killed. Or whatever. And that could be true, but I really feel like they believe what they say. And I feel like Lori was convinced those kids had turned into zombies. And so the whole thing is like, how can you can't if this was a movie script, nobody would believe it. They wouldn't even go to the movie because it's so ridiculous. but it's real life, and that's what's fascinating. Not just the horrific part that 2 kids are dead, which does always capture the nation's attention, but it's only every few cases that go like this and blow up like this. You have to have other elements to it.
And what is it in the court documents or that you've been able to uncover and see that allows us to get in the mind of Lori thinking that they're zombies?
Before she met Chad, so until I really started reading about her, I've read 1,800 pages of her child custody dispute with Tylee's dad. And that was a whole look into her before she ever met Chad. And while she was with Charles and married to Charles Vallow. And she had beliefs back then, at least I wouldn't call it zealot, but she would talk about in the papers, Joseph Ryan, Tylee's dad, would say, okay, I agree that when I have Tylee, she will have this much scripture reading time, things like that. That's a little far, even for just active members of this church to, and so you saw that. I also read her divorce custody disputes with Colby Ryan, her oldest son, his real father, which was not Joseph Ryan, but she never gave him his real father's last name. And in those, she's telling the judge why she needs a protective order, and she was talking about how he was abusive and he was this, but then he came back to her and he said he was going to church, and he said he was a Christian and that he loved God. So throughout all of her life, you see this real religious part of her that came into like court documents, even like that was so much a part of her. And then we've seen interviews with her best friend Melanie Gibb, and that is before she meets Chad Daybell, that she says Lori was always fascinated in the second coming and the end of times and what was happening after, and would study hard about that, which is why she went to this convention in St. George, Utah in October of 2018, and Chad was pushing one of his books there, and they met. And the first time they met, according to Melanie Gibb, Chad says to her, we've been married in several lifetimes before. And she's all in. In that moment, she's all in, even though at that time, reportedly, they're both happily married to their spouses. At that time, there was no discord that anybody knew about in either marriage. And it was immediate for those two. And then that was it. And so those two ever since then were thick as thieves. And I know that I'm hoping we're going to find out a lot more with this preliminary hearing coming up, but I know that they have a lot of probably electronic communications between the two of them that we don't know about yet, but we do know about some of them. And Chad has this whole belief that there's certain number of light points and dark points inside a person, and that's evil and good. And she asked him in an email to map out the light and dark points in her family members. And in there, he tells her, Charles Vallow, her husband, has so many dark points, so he's now a zombie. His spirit is no longer in him, and he's been overtaken by an evil spirit. And she believed it. So, and we know that because Charles Vallow, we see him on body cam footage when he's contacting police in January of 2019 and saying, I want my wife to have a mental health check. She's lost her mind. She says that I'm no longer Charles Vallow and I'm Ned Snyder and that I'm evil, and she's gone completely off the deep end, and this isn't her. So it appears that Chad Daybell already had these beliefs, and Lori just fell right into it, like hook, line, and sinker. And then they were trying to get other people in. So Chad basically tells her that Charles Vallow is going to die because he's a zombie, and he's on a business trip in Texas, and he's not going to make it back home. He's going to get in a car accident. So Lori actually goes to the airport and takes Charles' truck that's sitting in long-term parking. Charles flies back into town. His truck's not there. That's why the cops got involved the first time. He gets back home to their home in Arizona, and all the locks are changed, and Lori and the kids aren't there. And
that is bizarre.
Melanie Gibb says Lori thought he was supposed to die on that trip, and then he didn't. And she didn't know what to do about it. We know how Charles Vallow died. Her brother, Alex Cox, shot and killed him. So fast forward just a few months after that, so that was like January, this is now in July, he's shot and killed in Lori's home. They are now estranged. They're separated and going through a divorce. And he goes to pick up JJ in the morning to take him to school. And Alex Cox, Lori's brother, had spent the night before, so he was there. The only story we have is from the people that are still living. And Alex Cox is saying, we see it on body cam, that it was self-defense, that they got in a fight, and Charles Vallow came at him with a bat and hit him on the back of the head. And you can see Alex keep grabbing his back of his head during the interaction with the police. So Arizona was still investigating that death. And Lori picked up her kids and her brother, and they moved to Rexburg to be next to Chad. Chad still has a loving wife at home. And according to Melanie Gibb, she says that Lori didn't want to move to Rexburg because Chad told her that Tammy was supposed to die. It was going to be her time, Chad's wife.
Who died mysteriously.
But hadn't yet. And so Lori didn't want to move to Rexburg because Tammy was still alive. They're talking like this is normal people talk. Like this is just normal. Oh, okay. All right. He's supposed to die on a business trip. Okay. He's a zombie. I got it. Oh, now she's a zombie and it's going to be her time to go. And Chad had said stuff like, she'll totally understand because when she dies, she'll find out this was the big plan anyway. So she'll understand she needed to die. So Lori moves to Rexburg anyway, and her and Chad see each other, and they apparently walk around the BYU Idaho campus together. And then that is September. Both kids go missing in September. In October, Chad's wife dies in her sleep, mysteriously. Totally healthy.
Mysteriously.
Totally healthy. Just doesn't wake up.
Whatever happened to the brother?
What it really looks like, if you want to fast forward to the end, what it looks like prosecutors believe is that Alex Cox was kind of the hitman. The brother was kind of the hitman. He took out Charles Vallow. During this time that they're in Rexburg, Lori Vallow's niece, who's an adult and married and has kids, she's getting involved. Her name's Melanie, and she's getting involved in this belief. And Chad Daybell tells her that her husband is a zombie. So now she's worried, and that causes them to separate. And her husband takes the kids and goes into hiding. Well, someone took a shot at him one day, a shot through his vehicle while he was in it. And the car they saw leaving the scene matched the description of a car Alex Cox was driving. So now it looks like he probably took a shot at Brandon. And from what we know, from what Melanie Gibb has said, and from what we know from court documents, the last time JJ was seen was with Alex Cox. And the last time Tylee was seen, Alex was there. So people believe that he was doing his sister's bidding. Also, people say Alex bought into this hook, line, and sinker, this whole belief system. And the belief system is, according to Chad Daybell, they are being called to gather 144,000 people to help with the second coming. Now, what does help mean? I don't know, because people are dying around them. And
it's almost like they believe that they have to be dead in order to help.
Oh, so I should explain that part. What they believe is that Satan and his followers have the ability to take over your body and push your spirit out. And what happens now is your spirit is in limbo. It can't progress any further. It can't do anything until the host body is dead. And that's why I believe all these people are dying. However, maybe it started out that way, but I think it's pretty convenient that we have to get rid of spouses so we can be together. You know, so it's like, I don't know. I don't know what portion of them is evil and what portion of them is crazy religious fanatic.
Right, but when he interacts with her the very first time, he says we were married before multiple times in previous lives. So that's why they're doing whatever they can in their mindset to be together.
And Chad Daybell, according to Melanie Gibb, Lori tells Melanie, Chad says Tammy, his wife, is going to die, but she's going to understand because this is how things are supposed to be. And we're supposed to be married here on this earth right before Christ comes. So that's their mission. Now, you know, some people aren't buying it at all. Some people just think these guys are evil. They wanted to get rid of everyone in their lives and be together. But I think a lot of people believe that they kind of believe some of this, at least.
At least that's what it appears to be the motive.
Right.
You know, for us sane people that have to look at it from the outside.
But you know, even if you believe they believe all of this, that probably still doesn't cross the barrier of legal insanity, because it's a really high threshold for legal insanity. So I don't think they can even try and go there if they wanted to, because it is insane to us sane people. And the more and more I find out about all of this, it's just crazy it started. Chad Daybell says he's had 2 near-death experiences where he saw what he says beyond the veil, so basically into heaven, and that's what he started writing books about. That's how that started, and started talking about his experience, and that he came back to life, but part of the veil was left open, and so he has direct contact with God, and so he's doing his bidding.
Which is interesting, though, because that's not what LDS believes.
No. And any Christian that even believes in the Bible says right in there, no person, I'm not going to quote exactly, knows the time of the second coming of Christ. No person. So Chad Daybell can't know. Nobody knows. But he's twisted it. And LDS people don't believe that you have this portal opening to the other side. That's not, they believe that we lived before we came here. We came here and that's all been forgotten now because we're here doing other things and we're here to be tested and to have families and whatever, and then eventually return. But he's taken it so far off. What he has done, and I've had to look up certain scriptures to figure out what he's done with this 144,000. He calls it the Church of the Firstborn. I look, and there is talk like that in the Book of Mormon, but it pertains to like after the second coming and when we're in a different time period, like during he's taken it to be like now, and his job is to gather people. It's not like 144,000 people. Those are the people that are going to be saved. It's like they're going to be helping usher in. I don't fully understand it, but what I got out of all of that was he takes actual specific doctrine that those particular people do believe in, right? So it's not a far stretch when he twists it for them to say, because we know that we don't know everything. We know that not everything that, that God hasn't revealed every single last thing, if that's what you believe. So they're like, oh, yeah, this is ringing true to me.
And they both had separate dates for Doomsday. Is that right? And one of them has just passed.
So according to everything I've read, Chad said July 22nd of 2020 was going to be the day. But then when Melanie Gibb is interviewed and asked that, she said, well, I think Lori ended up doing all her own research and her own discovery, and she's put it sometime in August. So I don't know what happened with Chad Daybell when he sat in the jail cell and the 22nd came and went. I mean, we saw him yesterday in court or over video, and he looks perfectly healthy. So I don't know.
What is he being held on, and what is Lori being held on at the current?
They are both charged with concealing evidence. Let me get this. The scary thing about what they're charged with is it leads up to no time. So charged with a conspiracy to commit destruction, alter, or concealment of evidence. That's up to 5 years in prison. And there's 2 counts of that, one for each child. And Lori is still charged with that, as well as she's still charged from when she was originally arrested and not showing the children, resisting or obstructing an officer, solicitation to encourage Melanie Gibb to lie about where JJ was, and contempt by refusing to physically produce the children. All of those are up to 1 year, up to 6 months. So right now, they're really not facing much time at all because no murder charges have come out. But that is what they're being held on. And it's interesting for concealment of evidence, they're being held on $1 million bond. That's really high. And the prosecutor got that because they were children's remains, and it's so egregious that it was children. So that's where they sit right now.
And, this is probably happening because as the investigation is ongoing, they're hoping that they're going to be able to charge them with other things, while they're in custody.
Everyone just keeps assuming any time murder charges are going to come down, right? Nobody knows where the investigation is. Maybe we'll learn more. There's preliminary hearings coming up next week and the week after that for the concealing of evidence charges. And so at a preliminary hearing, the prosecutor puts on witnesses to prove his case for what they are charged with, and then the judge decides whether it's enough to go to trial. So that's what the preliminary hearing is. But in most preliminary hearings, we learn a lot of information, and some that we didn't know before, because they have to put on sort of a mini case to prove they have enough evidence. So that's what's coming up next week. Maybe we'll learn more that I don't know, because we think, and it can be assumed by everything that's out there, the prosecutors believe Alex Cox probably did the killings, and he's no longer alive. We didn't get to that, by the way. December of 2019, Alex Cox drops dead. He, first of all, he marries a woman in this belief system who can control the elements. So she's a whole other story. He marries her, and they'd only been married a couple weeks. And he is dead in his bathroom. So that was December. So, of course, all of us out here are like, oh, they offed him. He turned into a zombie. Like, he's the heavy hand. They had to get rid of him. You know, we just knew it was foul play, knew it. Months and months and months go by, and they won't release the autopsy. They finally released the autopsy and said he had an aneurysm, and it was natural. It was not foul play.
No.
People don't believe it. People are like, no, they didn't look for the right poisonings or something.
Right.
But the medical examiner says that it was like a medical event. It was not foul play.
Maybe the medical examiner is a zombie. I don't know. I want that investigated.
And then Tylee Daybell, Chad's wife, dies, right, in October. They go get married in Hawaii 2.5 weeks later. Tammy is immediately buried in Springville, Utah, which is her hometown. And then when all this happened and the kids went missing, then they went and exhumed her body to do further tests on it, because now they're suspicious, obviously, of her death. But they dug her up in December and still have not released any results. And we've had forensic death investigators on our show and medical examiners. And one of our regular guests, Joseph Scott Morgan, who is the best of the best, he just doesn't think there's any toxicology to be found after a couple months in the ground and you've been embalmed. Because the thought process would be she was poisoned, because how else is she just dying in the middle of the night? And we've also learned that the daughter, Emma, Chad's daughter, Emma, was a school teacher up there in Idaho, and that after her mom died, she told a co-worker that they found their mom in the morning in the bed, and she had pink foam coming out of her mouth.
I mean, you can't...
I hate to laugh because the whole thing is just tragic, but it's also so ridiculous that they thought they could get away with everything. Like, the kids, obviously, look, Chad knows those kids are buried in his backyard, right? I don't know, maybe, what can Lori say? Lori's the one, it's the mother. She's in charge of her children. Where does she think her children are all this time? So obviously she had to know. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not talking, so we don't know their story. We don't know their defense. We have no idea what their defense is, because they've not said anything. We just know what they believe, and what now people around them are starting to speak out about what they believe. But we don't know what they're going to say in court, or what their defense attorneys are going to say in court.
How do I find you?
So you follow me on Twitter at Kathy Russin. I also run the at Law Crime Network Twitter. And I do like to tweet play-by-plays when we're live in court, because it's something that I think is very important, that people can't always follow it live, but they can follow my Twitter. Yeah,
you make sense of it. And you also, aside from serious court stuff, post some funny tweets here and there too. So you got to watch for those.
With this case, every once in a while I get a little sarcastic. So
yeah. Well, yeah. I certainly appreciate connecting with you, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I want to thank my guests, Kathy Russin from Law and Crime Network and Kim Powell, reporter with AZ Family. I have links to their social media on my show notes. I'm also going to post case photos and videos on my website, truecrimedeadline.com, my YouTube channel, and social media accounts under the same name. Also, tune into Law and Crime Network, where you can see yours truly weighing in on the case. And this is a doozy. Investigators, until next time.
Thank you for investigating True Crime Deadline with Matt Johnson. For more information about the podcast, visit truecrimedeadline.com. And remember, all tips regarding a case should go to the police. Until next time.
Mr. Gatsby, want a cookie? Good boy. Now a post-episode shout-out to investigators who wrote reviews on Apple Podcasts. Again, writing reviews really helps independent podcasts like this one get noticed. It's easy, free. Hit 5-star, subscribe, tell a friend, write a review, and include your real name and your podcast name if you're a podcaster. Now, this first one comes from Kathy315. It's titled True Crime Bingeable. It says, excellent production, quality hosting, great stories. True crime fans will fall in love. Well, thank you. I love hearing that. And this one's titled Love It from Lad311. Great production value and super enthusiastic journalist with a great mix of cases. We try, and more's on the way every Sunday, Season 2. Now I want to leave you with two podcasts I'm listening to, Crime Lines and Bloody Murder.
Hi, I'm Barney Black.
And I'm Tara Saraban.
And we do Bloody Murder.
We're a weekly true crime podcast that focuses on some of the lesser-known crime stories from Australia.
And indeed around the globe.
We're a comedy podcast with a dark sense of humour.
But we're dead serious about murder and the people it affects.
We find humour in some unexpected places.
But never at the expense of the victims or their families.
We've been described as the blue cheese of podcasting.
Addictive, strong and satisfying.
And a bit stinky.
I am not.
You know you are.
Bloody Murder is available on your favourite podcatcher.
Hey there, Charlie here. You might recognize my voice from the true crime show Insight, R.I.P. I've rebranded the show as a solo show now, and it's called Crime Lines. I will walk you through the events of the crime, any trial that occurred, and the aftermath. Recent Crime Lines episodes include the Jack family, missing 30 years from British Columbia; Abraham Shakespeare, a man who won the Florida lottery and lost his life; and Janet Moses, a young woman who died in a Makatu lifting ceremony in New Zealand. And if you miss Insight, don't worry. The old episodes are still available on the Crime Lines feed, ready for you to binge. So go subscribe to Crime Lines on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.